The quorum. I call this November 24th, I believe. Yes, Finance Committee meeting to order. Good evening. It is 7 p.m. This open meeting of the Acton Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth and the local state of emergency declared by the Acton Board of Selectmen and Board of Health due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Selectmen has suspended all public gatherings, and in accordance with the Governor's order, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Governor's order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations and/or committee votes of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment at the beginning. For this meeting is convening by the Zoom app, it says here, so, as posted on the meeting agenda, town's website calendar, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right, first item we have is citizens' concerns. Looking at the list, I do not see any citizens who have their hands raised, so I'm going to bring on Dr. McQuillan and Ken Norris to join us here. As panelists, they should be here in a second. Dr. McQuillan will be speaking to us about the Minuteman athletic fields. Hello, Dr. McQuillan.
Hi, good evening. Good to see you this way, or anyway.
Would you like us to share the slides you sent out up on the screen?
Sure, if that would please the chair.
It's up to you.
Yes, I'll go through them quickly so we're all on the same page, so to speak. There we go. Yeah, next slide, please. So just to give folks a review, well, my name's Ed McQuillan. I'm the superintendent of Minuteman. Just to review, our MSBA project is a year early, and it's on budget. It's actually a little under budget, which is why I'm here this evening. Go back one. In our original MSBA project, we had a very minimal field. And I should mention the MSBA budget was submitted 6 years ago. You may recall we had a fairly long feasibility study, I think about 8 years. So in that original budget, we had less than $1 million for fields. Through exemplary project management, we now have about $4 million available to us from the MSBA project. And in this environment, we've had some pretty competitive bidding, so we've got great pricing on our base bid, which I'll share with you in a moment. And also we're experiencing some pretty historically low interest rates for borrowing. And with a small incremental investment, which is what I'm here to talk to you about tonight, which is basically lighting, we have a greater revenue opportunity with those fields. And if anyone would like any of the reports that I might reference myself, we can get them to you. But one of the things, we just opened bids not a week ago, at the beginning of October. So we have a fairly compressed time to act. Next slide, please. So our base bid includes 3 synthetic fields with a walking track around the largest field, the football field. And included in the base was also a baseball field, softball field. We had to maintain emergency vehicle access and drop off. Maintenance equipment, scoreboards, and utilities were in this base bid. Before we went to bid, we estimated that this alone would be about $5.9 million. Next slide. And along with the base bid, we bid alternates. Basically, alternate 1, 2, and 3 were lighting around the 3 fields. Alternate 4 was a competitive running track for high school track and field. Alternative 5 was some equipment associated with that, and alternate 6 was just fencing around the entire complex. Next slide. So back in June, when we were looking at the possibility of having some reserves from the MSBA project, the school committee looked at what other funds does this district have available to us. So around $4 million from the MSBA project. We also had revenue from our rental revolving account, and the school committee voted to put about $615,000 towards that. We also had a capital stabilization account with a pretty healthy balance in it. And the reason we had a healthy balance was about 6 years ago, I believe, we established a Minuteman capital stabilization account for the sole purpose of buying equipment for the new facility, because you may know that the MSBA formula for furnitures, fixtures, and equipment is woefully inadequate for a high quality, high performing vocational technical school. As a matter of fact, their formula for FF&E is pretty much the same for elementary, middle schools, and high schools. So we were putting aside $200,000 or $300,000 a year into that account. But the governor a few years ago came out with something called the Capital Skills Grant Program, and Minuteman has been very successful in getting grants. We just received another $300,000, which put our total award to about $1.5 million over the last 3 years from that. So we didn't have to go into the stabilization account at all. So the school committee decided to use that for the fields, and that's where we came up with our $5.9 million. Next slide. This is kind of hard to see, but we had 8 bidders, and the low bid, Heimlich Construction, has done some work in Lexington, has done fields throughout the Commonwealth. We interviewed them and Court Construction, and Heimlich came to us highly recommended, and they were awarded the base bid for those 3 fields, but not any of the alternates at this point. Next slide, please. So these were the costs associated with the bid alternates. You can see the lighting is about $1 million. The running track and field was about $600,000, and another $370,000 for the alternates 5 and 6. Next slide, please. This shows the lowest qualified bidder, including each of the alternates. So if you go along the rows, the construction budget was what Heimlich submitted, and then we, as you always do in a construction project, we put in about 10% for contingencies. Our owner's project manager is Skanska. That's the folks who've been with us since the beginning. KBA Architect as well, and other fees associated with permitting. These fields are in Lexington and in Lincoln, so we've had to go through the whole permitting process with both towns, and a full project was permitted about a year ago. But if you look at the bottom row, it shows the delta between what 5.9 million or so, and if you go all the way over for about another 1.9 million, which is what we're hoping to borrow, we could get all the alternates done. Next slide. So this just shows that that delta again. We were estimating a 1.7% interest rate. We've been hearing more like 0.7%. So we kept with our conservative numbers. Next slide, please. The other thing I wanted to share with our member towns is the revenue potential. We did a long analysis a few years ago around how many hours were available. We submitted all of our estimates to a company called Ballard and King. They came back and adjusted our revenue projections downward because they felt it was appropriate to use sort of municipal rates rather than what rates private athletic clubs might pay. So we used their figures, and once we're fully established, conservatively, we're estimating about $400,000 a year could be generated from these 3 fields. We've also been spending about $75,000 to $100,000 a year because we've had no fields for 3 seasons. This would have been our 4th season, and so those costs would go away once this project is in place. And the lighted athletic fields complement our other resources. We have a theater, a real technical theater, a gym, corporate meeting spaces, student union, courtyards, restaurants, training areas. So we're going to have a pretty robust revolving account, which we get once we get past COVID, and things may come back. Who knows when that will be? But next slide. So this shows the cost if we do borrow that 1.9 million, what the annual payment would be to the Minuteman District, and how that payment would be portioned out amongst the member towns based upon the current share. And you can see that Acton's share right now is roughly 10%. I think we have about 55 kids from Acton, which is the highest it's been in quite a while. And that would range from $22,000 to $19,000 over 10 years. Next slide. So this is our anticipated schedule. We did award the base bid in late October. The low bidder has agreed to hold the pricing on all the alternates until the middle of January. So that's why we're sort of accelerating this and trying to get it all done now. Next slide. Yeah, that's my presentation, Kristen. So any questions?
Sorry about that. Christine, could you please take us out of screen share? And Jason, please go ahead.
Just a question about the MSBA reimbursement. My understanding is that the reimbursement rate is set at the beginning of a project.
Yes.
I believe on this slide it said pending verification. Have you gotten some kind of commitment, some kind of adjudication from the MSBA that all of the elements of this project, all the elements of these fields, the lighting, the whole 9 yards, will conform to their reimbursement rates?
Our reimbursement rate was set 6-7 years ago at 44.75%.
Yeah.
And the lighting was the only piece of this that was in the original MSBA budget. So if we do not do the lighting, we would lose some portion of the reimbursement. The other components are, from the MSBA point of view, are considered an additional project. And we've already hit the limits for site work, which is about 8%. You can imagine our site work costs were pretty high because we not only had to build the new school and prepare that area, but take down the old school.
So I'm sorry, did you say that this is a separate MSBA project? If you've exceeded your site work limits from the original project, how do you have funds to apply to the fields unless this is a new project?
Well, site work is only one component of many components that are reimbursable. So we borrowed $145 million roughly, and we will have spent about 141 of that 145.
So you're not actually going to be getting 44% reimbursement off of this last couple of $1 million of the project. This is just money that you happen to have as a result of the original bonding.
Yeah, the additional $2 million is not reimbursable. That's
what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just being thrown by the language. I wouldn't consider the 4.1 million that you have as coming from the MSBA. I would consider that to be money that was taken out of the original bond that you have been able to value engineer or have surprise upside or whatever, so that you have this money at the end. I really wouldn't consider that MSBA money.
No, it's money from the project. It's not MSBA money.
Okay, I guess I was just thrown off guard by the way it was described in the slide as MSBA money.
So Hannah.
Hi, I just had a question on the process. I know according to the letter that Christy forwarded us, since the time your school committee meets, the member towns have 60 days to call for a special town meeting to, if they disapprove of this proposal. So my question is, what happens even if one member town does not go with this? Are you guys still able to proceed, or what happens?
No. If one town calls a special town meeting and disapproves the vote of the school committee to borrow 1.9 million, then we do not borrow, and the project is done. And the lighting and the alternates would not completed.
Anyone else? Right. Thank you. I don't know what information we can give you apart from that. Is there anything you'd like us to address specifically?
Me? No, just thanks. I just want to let everyone know what's going on and recognize your school committee member from Acton, Pam Nurse, and Mike Majors, who's on the school building committee, representing Acton for the last, I don't know, Mike, 10 years or so. Took a long time to get the building built.
It seems like 10 years.
Well, it's a beautiful building. Well done.
Thanks. I hope you all get a chance to visit again real soon.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much. I will put you back to attendees and you can decide if you want to stick around or not.
Thank you.
Bye, Pam.
Thank you.
1 second. Okay. Next up is ALG update. We had a very short, not very interesting, compared to the previous two, rather, not very interesting ALG meeting. Highlights are that taxes are coming in well still. The biggest, and it's not even a very big thing, we're not expecting to hit interest income estimates. And I don't know if it's even worth having Steve speak to that. It sounds like the estimate was 150,000, and it's going to be coming in a lot lower than that. Local receipts are still mostly going to be coming in Q3 when the excise taxes go out. The CARES Act guidance has been changing, so it's a little bit of a challenge to make sure everything is going to get covered that we hope to be, that comes up for both the towns and the school, unfortunately. As Christine mentioned in our previous meeting, the schools pointed out that staying open is costing an awful lot. There have been, at the time of our meeting on the 19th, there had been 19 cases since the start of November, but no indication of student spread. I think the email I saw yesterday said that there were up to 24 cases in the schools. So because of all this, they've ordered standalone air purifiers for all of the rooms, costing about $500,000. That means that they will be able to keep the rooms a little warmer than they had been thinking previously, just because it was proving very cold for the rooms that could have the windows open. And it lets them use the other rooms better that can't. Jason, I presume will speak later on to the school building. Any changes there? The sidewalks are being planned for the fire station. The budget calendar has moved out 60 days from when it normally would be. So, because even though we've moved ours further than 60 days, Foxborough hasn't moved theirs, so we're still working on all the timing for that. The calendar will be formalized. Christine, did the school committee formally vote on the calendar?
I should have that answer for you, except that I have failed to watch the school committee video yet, so I will just email that to the committee as the second item.
Thank you. They were planning on voting on it. The thing to note this year that had happened last year also is rather than having what in a while ago had been one long Saturday, last time they did it, some of the big projects for them over a number of meetings, and then we had our budget Saturday. This year they're continuing to have some of the big topics over different meetings, and then we'll have our budget evening in lieu of budget Saturday. So I'll send the calendar out when I have it, and that'll give us indication. It might be worthwhile for all of us to attend some of the school committee meetings that we wouldn't normally do otherwise. Christine, please tell me if I've missed anything you think should be mentioned.
I have $250,000 on the air purifiers rather than $500,000.
Oh, okay, that's a better number. I like that.
It is a better number. They looked at testing programs, and they're starting at 1.2 million. The state apparently is starting to offer testing, but it's rapid testing, and it's the kind that has a lot of false negatives and false positives, and so they're not comfortable with going that route. But that's about it. At this point, in case you have not already heard, the high school is closed for 2 weeks. They have too many cases that resulted in quarantines. So they've got over 100, I believe, between students and teachers quarantined, and it just didn't make sense to keep the building open right now. So they're taking a 2-week break and then reassessing, or going back in. Sorry, and then they will assess as they go.
All right. Now we will move on to our reserve policy discussion. Steve.
Yeah, I have a concern about the ALG process this year and pushing things off 60 days, whatever. That's all well and good, but as I look at the plan that keeps getting reproduced every month, it shows bigger and bigger deficits. The conversations we've had, last time, the town manager indicated he didn't think we should use more than $1.1 million in reserves. We have proposed in the past that we should, consider a cost savings initiative, which ALG wasn't too keen on. Back in May, when we revised our point of view, we said we needed a new 3-year detailed cost estimate. Well, we're not getting anything, and I just want to remind the committee that it's not ALG's responsibility, it's not the school committee's responsibility, it's not the Board of Selectmen's responsibility to do long-range fiscal plans. According to the town bylaws, Chapter B, it is our responsibility to do it. And I'm just not hearing a whole lot of support for the idea that we should be doing any planning beyond this year. I realize it's a tough year to plan, but we will. It may seem pretty bleak right now, but FY23 and FY24 are going to happen. World's not going to end in 21 or 22. So I am very concerned that we keep floating a plan that has $11.5 million in deficits in 3 years out there, and nobody seems to want to talk about the consequences of, if you can't use reserves and you can't cut costs, you can only have an operating override. And I don't want this to be some sort of, well, gee, here we are. We only have one solution left. So if we need to be more formal and ask for support to do a 3-year plan, I think maybe we should do that. If they don't want to participate, like I said, it's not their responsibility, it's ours.
Could you elaborate on that?
Elaborate on which aspect of?
All of it. Let's start with the 3-year plan. You're saying that we could take over making our own and present it to ASG, as I understand you.
Like I said, if the bylaws are specific, it's our responsibility. They don't specify 3 years, but they say long-range fiscal plans. We have for many, many years relied on the ALG process as being a better way to plan, though many years it's been like pulling teeth to get them to focus on anything but the budget year. But getting all the boards involved in the process I've always thought was a better plan than doing it ourselves. However, I'm not seeing a whole lot of inclination to do anything about it. And you can say we'll put it off 60 days, but you know, these things, the last 2 years, the ALG plan often come down to the last meeting of the ALG. Anybody here that's been on ALG will say that's usually the case. There's not a lot of focus on it. Yet we know that the state is going to have fiscal problems for a few years from COVID. We don't know what the federal government support will be like. So I would hate to have us back into some sort of operating override because we just simply hadn't done the homework to think about what might happen. How we would do it? Yeah, we'd have to send formal documents with questions and requests for data to both operating entities, and then try and put it together. We can certainly put it together in public sessions, and people other than us can have input. Rather not do it that way, but I certainly would rather not have this committee not perform one of its central obligations.
Thank you. Any other input? Ideas, feelings, questions? Christine?
Steve, I just want to understand everything correctly as well. So this is different than like a cost-saving committee, right?
Right.
Right. Okay. So this would be a 3-year forward-looking plan for how we're going to meet our ever-increasing expenses for the town and the school. So ALG had actually talked about possibly not having our next upcoming meeting, and we suggested that by this evening's end, we hoped to have a final reserve policy and a final point of view that we could bring to ALG.
No. That would be by the end of December 8th. We have another meeting between here and the
That's
ALG meeting.
convenient as well, but I think we could do it tonight. So that we can walk in there with here's what we're recommending and here's what we need from you to hopefully accomplish or at least get that started. Does that sound like?
I mean, I don't want to abandon the ALG process. It has worked well for the town and schools over the years. However, I am very concerned that whatever we want to talk about this year, they don't want to talk about. Whether it's cost savings, taxpayer relief, reserve use, we can't have a conversation if they don't want to talk about anything we want to talk about. So that to me is a kind of a red flag that we may have to do something different. And yes, I don't know what year it was. Maybe it was 2009 or 10 or something. If you dig into the warrants, you will find that that which is always labeled the ALG plan was labeled the Finance Committee plan, because in the end, we couldn't quite agree on the last 2 years. So there's precedent, but like I said, I prefer not to go that way. But we have our responsibilities under the town bylaws. And this is not a year I'd like to whip on, that one in particular.
I have always personally been frustrated that the plans are not well formulated years out. I understand that there's wiggle room, but I'd like a little more than we have. One idea I've had that might be a good middle ground or a starting point anyhow would be to take the ALG plan and using its reserve replenishment assumptions, put in what we think the budget just do the math for what the budget increases would be to stay within not having to do an override, which is what a lot of what you had done in your spreadsheet there. Do you think that would be a good place to start, or?
Yeah, I think we have to put some boundaries around what the ALG spreadsheet looks like. Right now, anybody not familiar with the process would say, oh my goodness, they can't balance this budget. And $11.5 million worth of deficits is more than the reserves we have. So that leaves you with only one conclusion. So we have to do some harder looking at where the spending is going to be. Like I said, back in our interim revision to the point of view in May, we suggested that we start doing the work. But so far, and I'm not saying people aren't busy, but if you're always too busy to plan, you know what? When you get unpleasantly surprised in the future, you got nobody to blame but yourself.
Any ideas on how we should proceed with that? Anyone? Christine.
I mean, I nominate Steve for 3-year plan subcommittee chair.
If you make it a committee, it's got to be open meeting minutes, open meeting law.
I'm going to stop talking to these meetings. Keep giving me work.
I'm shocked.
Do we want to,
I don't think that to speak just briefly on behalf of maybe ALG. I don't think that Christy and I have necessarily pushed this idea at ALG. I think that we quickly got caught up in our initial reserve conversation, and our ability to impact ALG thoughtfully stalled until we can better define what that is, which we were hoping to do at the very next ALG meeting. That's not to say that we sure wouldn't like a whole lot of thought and input on the best way to address this with them going forward.
Well, I mean, it's not so critical that we have to start on it next week. So if you want to bring it up at one of your other ALG meetings, that's fine. But every month I look at the plan, and every month it seems to either not change or get worse. And as I said last spring, the impact of recessions, I'm not sure we're going to have one, tends to last for a few years. From the town side, certainly I didn't ever think it would be a big problem in FY21. Don't know what the state will come up with. They seem to be planning to use half of their rainy day fund in 22 or 20. Eventually the rainy day fund runs out. So I think we have to start thinking about longer term issues than just this next year. With more precision and more thought behind it than we usually do.
My thinking relative to ALG was to go into the next meeting with our presentation of at least our idea about reserves, reserve policy, reserve usage, and pretty quickly bring up the idea that at current rate we're looking at overrides next year and probably for the next few years, because They just need to understand that that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, in eons and eons ago, when an ALG first used to get together, we used to talk about the split, which fortunately we don't argue about anymore. But the other kind of operating rule of thumb was if there was an override, you had to decide by October, based on an April town meeting. If we're pushing out 60 days, okay, so now if there's going to be an override, we need to decide by January. I would probably back that up because it has been so long since we had an operating override in this town that most of the people that actually organized it and worked for it are either have moved out, their kids are out of the school system, or they're dead. So we would need a lot of work to get in a position to have an override campaign. So it's not something that we can put off indefinitely, but we can certainly put it off for another month.
And just back to base level, an override would have to happen if they could not close the gap on the current 1.6 million.
Correct. Which is a nice segue into reserve policy.
It's all connected. What I personally came out of our discussion last week with, I need to apologize to Jason. I got completely sidetracked from having a deep discussion on the information you had presented about the various revolving funds, enterprise funds, and their accounts as a part of overall money that the town is holding. Given that that money is in buckets that are not accessible to cover general operating needs, I'd like to recommend that we come up with something that I currently am thinking of as a dashboard, just a overview that we have for keeping track in terms of reserves where various accounts are, just to see along the lines of trying to figure out what the upper reserve is, how things are balanced out. There's another one we don't have in there that we look at right now is the school's capital stabilization fund. And I think that'd be a good number for us to also be keeping an eye on. Christine, could you bring up Steve's?
Yes. Steve, do you mind if I'll put up your original if you want. I also tried to recreate it in a slide in the POB that may or may not reflect what you had in mind.
Just
If it doesn't, let me.
okay.
Are you soliciting input at this point?
Very much.
I think the 10% number is too high. I don't think that we should be holding fully 10% ready for another year. I understand that we need to set the floor at 3%. That was what was described in the previous meetings, even though I do contend that 3 to 5% is a relatively new requirement, and I'm still hoping to see documentation of where that 3 to 5% is being given, that guidance being given to us by rating agencies. I think the first line there, okay, got to be more than 3%. If that's what we agree upon, I'm okay with it. But I think the other two numbers are too high. I think the middle number should be 5, and I think the bottom number should be 7. I think that we're holding way too much of taxpayer money in various buckets throughout the town, and it has allowed what I consider to be some pretty inappropriate spending to go on because we have the money. Lacking fiscal discipline, we need to shut off the spigot. So I would suggest we change those numbers to 3, 5, and 7.
Other input? Christine?
So the middle number is at 8% because it doesn't make sense to me to have a range outside of our own finance department's range. And if their range is 3 to 8%, and ours is 5%, we're always going to be at odds over the ceiling.
I believe they said 3 to 5 in the last
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, 3 to 5.
Sorry, yes, you're absolutely right. I'm thinking of So the 8% was what Steve Noon had assigned to this number as a stab in his, because it also includes the school's portion of E&D and stabilization. If I understand that correctly, right, Steve?
Yeah, and the 8% was a guess.
Right.
Number for discussion. For reference, a rough calculation of where that number is right now, if you exclude the sewer reserves, we're at about 11%. Meaning if you add up all the reserves and retained earnings, E&Ds and things like that, and take that as a percentage of all the fiscal 21 expenses, then you come up to about 11%.
And I believe that now's the time to start paring that back. So, okay, I said that piece. I think it should be 3, 5, and 7.
I'm curious, just straight logistically, free cash and stabilization fund is a little over 3%, as I understand it. And if you don't include the enterprise funds, et cetera.
I don't believe that's true. I believe that free cash and stabilization puts us around 6 million. Is that correct? 5.75 is the number that we've been using for free cash and stabilization.
Hold on a second. Let me. 1 second, I'll be right back.
Yes, we are at 5.75 million.
Okay, and we're at 106 million, so we're closer to 5% already. Even before we get into the other, components.
5.75.
Right, that's the number I have. 5.75 on a 106 million.
I'm sorry, actually
Okay.
5.82.
But I don't see, Jason, how we can possibly say that the top end for school and town should be 5%.
Well, the top end for schools on E&D is 5%.
By law.
And then
Right.
we add their stabilization on top of that.
Right, but if you're combining all of those, which is what that bullet point suggests, and saying that you think the ceiling on the town's reserves, the town's free cash, the town's stabilization, Acton's portion of excess and deficiency, and Acton's portion of the stabilization fund should be no greater than 5%, we're not going to have any compliance. The school is trying to keep theirs around 4.7%. The town is trying to keep theirs around 5%. You're not going to get that number.
Well, some of the, and again, enterprise funds are tricky, but some of those have very significant retained earning balances, which is driving up the overall numbers, especially compared to what their budgets are. I mean, I think I calculated that the enterprise funds had about a $2.9 million retained earning balance on $5 million worth of expenses. Now, again, a lot of that is sewer. It's at least $1 million in retained and $2 million in expenses, but it's still a lot of money in retained earnings. How accessible it is, that's a good question.
It might make more sense to me to have a 3 to 5% range for the town's free cash and stabilization, a 3 to 5% range recommendation for the schools, and a 3 to 5% recommendation range for each of the enterprise funds. Or lower, I don't know what those need to have for a floor.
Well, an enterprise fund can be set up to make a little bit of money, though not a lot. Can be set up to break even, or can set up to be subsidized. And we have examples of each. But the building up of retained earnings in some of these things, kind of is getting up there, unless you can come up with like a capital expenditure that you can use the retained earnings for, equipment at the transfer station, or I don't know what, at the commuter parking lot, but based on what we're getting for revenue versus the cost, I think we need to figure out uses for that stuff, which may impact how much money you spend elsewhere in the budget. So you can't tap them directly like you can free cash or stabilization fund, but you could possibly find a way to make use of them.
Sounds to me like maybe a good project would be for us to go through some of the enterprise funds and look at them historically, find out what those larger retained earnings balances, if there are specific plans made for them, or why that's being allowed to go like Jason.
I say that should be a question that we can submit right now for whatever budget Saturday, whatever form budget Saturday it takes this year. That's a question that we should absolutely request right now to hear from the town on, for example, why are we putting $140,000 into the ambulance fund when the ambulance fund has $610,000 in retained earnings already?
Why wait?
I said we might as well do it right now.
Okay, but you said do it now for budget Saturday. I'm saying, why don't we just ask it?
Works for me.
Having looked at these numbers most recently, would you be willing to write up questions?
Sure.
Any other ideas on that? I can't see people so much, so just shout it out.
Roland.
Here's a question for Steve. Of those the funds we were just talking about, the what do you call them?
Enterprise funds.
Enterprise funds. Thank you. Does that have to go before town meeting to tap that money, or can an enterprise such as the transfer station or the sewers or whatever tap that money because they have it? Or is it
Each year, there's an article for each one of them that sets their budget. And when we set the expenditure budget, we say how we're going to meet that number. And there, you have to specify, so much is going to be made up from user fees, so much is going to be made from retained earnings, So an article for town meeting vote is going to say how you tap that money.
it can only be used within that enterprise? It can't be used. It can't be siphoned off and given to the municipal budget as an additional income source.
Um,
In other words, so they build up a ton of it. They're going to go, okay, we're going to buy, I don't know, something for the, You know, like they did a bunch of years ago for with the commuter lot parking. We had a bunch of receipts, and we ended up using that for something else, and then had to put it back in later on.
I mean, we've purchased ambulances out of the ambulance enterprise fund.
Which that makes sense. That's what you use it for.
We've certainly purchased heavy equipment out of the transfer station fund, so it kind of has to be related. Except if you have subsidized an enterprise fund in the past, like the transportation one where we subsidize it every year, that money can be taken back to the general fund. The problem there is that's not one that has a lot of retained earnings.
Sahana?
This question is for Steve. Since we're discussing so much of the reserves and putting a percentage, we are breaking it down and trying to put a percentage on some of these things, and including the E&D and the enterprise funds into this reserve policy. Has Acton done this before? In all your years service to the town, is it time that we are looking at something like this, or have you guys discussed this before? Has it been done during the previous recessions, or is this something totally new that we are talking?
We certainly have reserve policies, and we've never established any kind of percentage around this very broad definition of reserves that includes all of the enterprise funds before. Though it's been a topic that's been discussed by this committee fairly often. Not specifically setting a reserve target, but how to use the money that keeps accruing into these funds. If you go back more than 5 or 6 years, then reserve policies would have been discussed on a slightly different basis, meaning we would have had to include the K through 6 or Acton Public Schools in the town side, and the E&D portion was only applicable to the junior high and high school. So we've talked around it many times, Sahana, but this is the first time in my recollection we're looking at it in this precise manner.
Christine?
So I do understand having a reserve policy that looks at and understands all of the town's reserves that they're holding, all of the taxpayer money, and having a full concept approach. I don't think at this time we have enough understanding of each of these enterprise funds to develop one, and I think that if I had my way, we would table the enterprise fund portion of our reserve policy. We would create a well-defined reserve policy that leaves those out for now, but determine to have that fully understood and fully resolved by the end of the year, so that we walk into the next year knowing how to write that into our reserve policy going forward. I don't know how everybody thinks about that, but I don't think we can make forward progress, and I don't want to drag out even further our uncertainty regarding our reserve policy.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because if you look at the, let's use a financial term, the liquidity of the money we're talking about, the further you get away from free cash and stabilization funds, the less liquid the reserves are. meaning, we certainly can't get at retained earnings of enterprise funds very directly or very quickly. And in point of fact, we can't get at school district E&D directly. So yeah, it would make more sense to have the policy more focused on what is more liquid, in the sense of what can we use quickly, directly to impact things. That's not to say that those things don't matter, because in fact they do. If I was under the impression that the E&D was going to be at 1%, not closer to 5%, I would maybe say that the town's free cash and stabilization limit should be higher. But under the circumstances that we've been working on of late, E&D's been in the 3 or 4% range, whereas you went way back to right after regionalization, I think they were down 2% range. So part of it is situational, part of it depends on year to year. But for now, I'd say setting a 3% threshold is the most important thing we have to accomplish on a reserve policy this year. And yeah, setting an upper threshold is something we can certainly do it this year, but it's something that would probably have to be revisited pretty frequently, depending on the situation at the time.
Jason.
So I appreciate you agreeing that all of the different Tyndall puddles of money need to be taken into account. But I am a little concerned about trying to make a too clear a delineation between the highly liquid and the three different levels of liquid. After that, the E&D is one set of restraints. Rightly so, the sewerage is a completely different level of restraints, because that is more or less user fee based, not spread evenly across the town. And then the remaining enterprise budgets are yet a different level of illiquidity. I understand all of that, but I am concerned about if you make too clear a delineation between it, then psychology leaves open the door for, well, then we just need to tie up as much as we can in these less liquid funds and build war chests in different places. So I think if you don't look at it holistically, you are encouraging war chesting. And that is not something I want to see happen.
So my only real concern along those lines is that I would hate for us to develop a policy which suddenly meant that the town felt that, or someone felt that less money needed to be saved in one of the funds, like free cash or stabilization fund or some such, because the school had decided to put more money into their stabilization fund. I don't want to have the point where we hit a point where the town is diminishing their reserves because of one of these other places that we can't actually access the money. But for me, that's an across the town to school district division.
Understood, but it all comes out of the taxpayer pocket. And again, I don't want there to be multiple war chests going on. And I think by clearly stating that we don't feel that as a committee, we do not feel that the town and the two taxing entities should be sitting on 10, 12, 15% of what they need in a year in all the various different buckets of where they've been able to squirrel away money.
That's fine, but what's the right number, Jason? How do we calculate the right number without really understanding each of these enterprise funds, what drives them, what they're saving for, which we can do, we can absolutely do, but can we not do it right now?
I'm okay to hold off for a little while longer, but I do not want to hear again from either of the taxing entities, we've got the money in hand, so let's go ahead and do this thing. When, in all honesty, if we had not had this excess, then perhaps the delineation between a need and a want would be a little less easy. It would be a little more stark and a little less easy to overrun. I stand behind it. We've wasted money the last couple of years, and I have not been able to stop it. So, by all means, let's not give them that excuse again.
Now, I know the things that have driven me nuts, but can you give me an example of one of yours?
Oh, I believe the small business grant, it was a terrible use of taxpayer dollars. I believe
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you
$100,000.
made that clear. How about another one?
I believe $100,000 for a toilet is a terrible use of money. I believe that even though it's coming out of CPC, I believe that the Asa Parlin House is going to end up being a money suck that comes out of a different taxpayer bucket, but still a taxpayer bucket. And I know I'm lost on this one as well. I don't understand why we have a fire station that sleeps 12. These are all issues where I believe that had the pencil been a little sharper and the reserves in hand being a little more daunting, that perhaps we would not have done some of those things. Also, by the way, if we want to go back far enough, if we didn't have the reserves, I believe it was a Board of Select member who said, we already have the $1.8 million for the Walker property. So there's 4 examples there. You add that together, we're looking at, $3 million or so. Pretty soon you're talking real money.
All right, can we agree that the 4th bullet can come off or be on there for information only?
I think we take it off and consider, part of what I'm wondering about is we're trying to put what I think needs to be a nuanced idea into a slide for the general public. And there maybe should be a different place that we keep some of this information.
That is the double-edged sword of the point of view being a document that we share with the public, but whose primary audience is the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah. Anyone want to jump in? This is one of those views where I can't see you, so if you're raising your hand, just speak up. Okay, are we going to stick with the 8% idea for now? Do we want to talk about that further?
Maybe we should talk about it further.
All right, you want to lead us on something?
I just want to say that maybe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can we revisit this in our next meeting, because I really need to understand a little bit more before I agree on any of this.
Yes, I fully believe that we will need to talk about this further at our next meeting, but would like to have as complete of a discussion as we can tonight also. Did you want to talk further about something specific, Roland?
No, I just don't know if the 8% is the right number right there. I don't know what the number should really be, but maybe more 6%, 7%, along those lines. That's my only comment on it.
We could try backing into that number. Given the guidance the town is working on with their 3% and 5%, or their 5% upper limit, the 5% for the E&D fund, and the projected stabilization fund use and budget, we could look at where we think it would be likely to end up.
No, it'd be more beneficial.
Christine, Mike was looking to talk. Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just think right now at this point, any number we put out there is just a guess. We need to develop a real, spreadsheet, a model that calculates, what those numbers look like at 3%, at 5%, at 8%, and so you can actually measure the exact impact, or at least the theoretical impact of each. Right now, we're throwing numbers out there. We're just guessing, and that's really no way to run a circus. We need to have some kind of tool. We need the ALG model, and we got to run some numbers. We got to do our job. Just that would actually measure the impact of when we throw in the different percentages that you think is the right number. Right now, as I said, it's only a guess, and we have no friggin' idea.
Would you volunteer to take that on, Mike?
No.
Flat
In the
out,
sense that I'm not as close to the numbers as you guys are. But you know what I'm saying.
Yes, we do. I mean, it is our job to actually base this on real things. I don't know how we decide within actual numbers, but
That is why I quoted actual hard numbers last meeting with a spreadsheet that I had forwarded to you, Madam Chairwoman. So respectfully, we were looking at hard numbers.
1 second. I had that up a second ago. Please discuss while I try to find Jason's information.
I'm all for tabling the upper limit for a later time. If we're not prepared to have this in the next, by the next meeting or by the next ALG, if we want to agree on 3% as the floor, and we revisit the top, the ceiling later, I'm okay with it, with the proviso that I do firmly believe that the message that should be received by the Board of Selectmen is this is the year for tax relief. If you look back at our previous reserve policies, we counted free cash, stabilization, and unused tax levy capacity. There's no reason to talk about unused tax levy capacity right now because we don't have any, because we spent it all. So again, it's time to sharpen the pencil. And I don't know how to make that message any clearer.
But that's a separate conversation, Jason, than our reserve policy.
All related. It's
Now,
all interrelated.
Our reserve policy is our reserve policy is our reserve policy, and it applies no matter what. And our POV is where we sharpen the pencil for the year, specific to the year, and by applying our reserve policy. We shouldn't have a recession-based reserve policy or an overspending-based reserve policy. We should have a reserve policy that makes sense for the health of the town, period. And this whole discussion got started because we were trying to decide if our reserve policy should include different buckets. And I
believe the conversation got started because ALG pushed back and said that the reserves were not enough when we were saying it's time to use more of the reserves to provide tax relief. I believe that's the genesis of this.
Sure, but we were not clear in our own board what we wanted our reserve policy to be when we made that statement.
Well, we've always been pretty good at establishing minimums. We've never been good at figuring out upper limits. It's a bit more of an ethereal exercise. So, but as Jason says, it has a real world consequence. If you don't have an upper limit, then you're going to potentially overtax or overspend, and maybe not be as robust in your analysis as you could be. So it's easy to argue that we need one. It's harder to argue what the number should be.
1 second. Christine, can you remind me what was included in the H% number? That was free cash, stabilization, E&D, and the school stabilization fund? Okay, since Mike is failing to take this up, I will figure out what those numbers would be based on the most recent ALG plan. If we looked at it at 3% baseline, 5%, 8%, unless there's some other number people want to look at. Okay,
That's right.
I'll bring that to our next meeting.
I think you should make Dave weigh in.
Dave, what would you like to share?
This is a complicated time for me with bedtime and juggling multiple children. I defer to the expertise of your wisdom.
Thank you. Let me just write a note to myself. So I'll do 3, 5, and 8.
I might as well just do a table. It goes down to 6.25, 7, and
Just a slider.
7.5.
Once you get the basics set, it's
That's right.
pretty easy to change the formula in the cells in Excel.
Okay. Anything else you want to say on that? Like Sahana said, we will return to this again next week. From my point of view, and please tell me if you think something different. The point of view is one of the most important things we do in the course of the year, and this is central to that. This and our recommendation on budgetary increases that the public can hold. So we have some extra time this year, given the town meeting getting pushed back. I'd like to spend some more time on this. Okay. Then let me just check my notes if there's anything else. Oh, yes, at our next meeting, I'd also like to discuss our position relative to the need for an override or not, because I have some opinions about it. But I think once we have a better understanding of our agreement on our reserve policy, that it's going to be clear how much we think that'll be necessary, and a good thing to get in front of everyone early with that, if that's what we think is being looked at in our position on it. Okay, anything else for the point of view? Christine, do you want to bring up the OPEB slide?
Oh,
We don't have to.
no, I thought we were. Are we not going through the point of view?
Oh, we can do the whole thing. I didn't know we had more to do.
I would like to have hold on. I would like to have this as much finalized as possible. Obviously, slotting in whatever we determine to be our final.
Please take us through it.
Okay. One of the reasons I wanted to go through it is that the unemployment rate has changed again.
I'm sorry, one second. Steve Barrett, could you please confirm in the memo I have from John dated November 9th, we have the total reserves of $5.82 million. Is that correct?
That's correct. Free cash and stabilization.
That was on the other slide you had. I think it must be slide 4, Christine.
Okay. The unemployment rate has gone down. In Acton, in Middlesex County, and in Massachusetts. So that's a good thing. But I think it's unlikely to stay down, given what we're seeing as far as future COVID shutdowns. And I just wanted to keep these numbers in briefly so that you all could see the change.
Would it make sense to have 3 data points for each of those towns? February of 2020, the peak and the most current month, to show the round trip where we've been, or the fact that we're not actually round trip yet?
Possibly.
Yeah, I would caution that 1% change is really just the fact that The state opened up, restaurants and all of those type of facilities late summer, third quarter, and that's the result that we're seeing. So I would definitely expect the unemployment to rise again now that we're shutting things down again.
Right. And it's unclear where it's going to land. When everything's said and done, it's not going to go back to where it was.
No, and it really should dig deeper next time, because businesses that survived the first round, a lot of them are not going to survive the second round.
Right.
So are you suggesting that we add to Jason and to Adam's point, that we add another slide to this about the unemployment rate, or is it just? I mean, it looks like Christine has enough room on the slide to move everything up.
Yeah, I can make that.
I don't think we need another slide. I think just for that bottom line, just have three months.
But I think it's important to somewhere highlight how much the median household income has declined.
No, I'm not saying get rid of the top two lines.
Oh no, I'm
not
saying that
saying
it
no.
might be worth having another slide just to talk about income and unemployment rate. We've seen a significant change in the last year.
So this typically is our snapshot of where we are at the time that we print the POV. The only reason it's changed in this setting is because it is such a changeable number at this point, where it typically is pretty static. I think speaking, easy enough to speak to the changes, but I feel like there's a place for it lower possibly in the presentation.
Okay, but I think having spoken to people at ALG, I get the sense that there are a lot of people out there who have not felt any change from this. At 2 meetings ago, John Peterson expressed the idea that there were people who had lost their jobs and there are people who are fine, not really taking into account the number of people who the news was terming out have become underemployed in that they've had their incomes lowered, which is an unusual thing, at least in my understanding of the entire time I've been out of college. So I think it would be good to point out to the town the change that we've had just since the start of this.
Agreed. I wonder if this belongs under our concerns on the recession slide.
I want it to be in here somewhere.
Okay. All right.
Can I make a suggestion? Instead of putting it on the slide, you can make a note of it underneath in the notes. It doesn't need to be the way it's on the slide. Just put it in sentence underneath and quote the numbers.
Yeah.
We don't want to have another slide exclusively for this.
Right. I think I can get this information in on our recession slide and tell the story. But I can make a mention of it definitely in the verbiage on this slide. So it's brought up a couple of times throughout the presentation. I would note that the median home value also went up more.
Yeah, the town just sent an email about that. Median home value is up 1% over last year, and condos are up 3%.
Okay. You said 5.8?
5.82.
2? Right. This number has changed quite a bit in the FY20 number because the median household income is down from previous year, but the median home value has gone up, and the tax bill as the effective tax rate is based on the home value. So now we've gone to a much higher tax bill as percentage of income.
This probably says what I wanted to have elsewhere, because you've got that right in a row.
Right. So I think this might tell some of the story you're looking to tell as well. That if and I say it down here, I believe that basically if everything had held steady, we actually would have seen, a pretty steady tax rate. Actually, the effective tax rate's a little lower. Home values would have gone up a tiny bit as usual, a little bit as usual, income would have gone up a little bit as usual, and this number wouldn't be far off from the FY 18 number. But with the decrease in income, the increase in home value, people are putting a higher percentage of their paycheck into their tax bill.
Very, very powerful slide.
But I think you also look at the median household income dropping off between 18 and 19 too.
You did, yeah.
That's a little surprising based on what the economy was like last year at this time. And then obviously because of COVID,
Right.
It's everything's just upside down, so to speak.
Yep.
Why don't you have fiscal year 21 there?
Because I said I was going to change this last time, and I didn't. I'm fairly certain that this should be FY 21, this should be 20, and this should be 18, and this should be, and I will fix that. In fact, yeah, no, it's a picture. I will fix that. Because that's what that should read. Okay. This hasn't changed. This hasn't changed. I had brought in this slide last time. Whoops. And Mike had thought it would be more effective as a pie chart.
Mike's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mike is right. So I got it. I did put all the debt exclusion together under debt exclusion, but then spelled it out in the verbiage underneath. And then we've got the dollar figures over here on the right.
Dean, can you go back to slide 7? There's no, the other slide, we have it down at the bottom, but maybe we should have FY 21. Our town spending FY 21 or something, because the other pie chart has that. This one doesn't.
Done.
Excellent. I just wanted to be consistent.
Yep. Agreed. You know what? I'll change this too so that it says FY 21 up here, and then.
Well, I think it's fine there because you have FY 21.
I like consistency, so I'll remove it from here, and it'll just say municipal funding sources.
Thank you.
So Christine, quick question. Are you looking at an old, one of the previous revisions of the point of view?
I don't think so.
Because I'm looking at a different one that you had sent, and I see some of the corrections that we're talking about with 21 added.
Huh. Okay. Thanks. I'll go through and make sure I haven't stepped us back accidentally when I was working on it.
Adam, do you have your hand up, or is this from the previous?
That was from previously.
All right. So I will delete this slide, and we will go with this bar chart. This is not new, except that I included the payments ending in the information below because that was asked. I included this. This is new, and it does capture, I believe, all of the reserves.
Well, I think Christian just said the number was 5.825. That would show it as
That should be 3.75. So 2.07.
This is, that doesn't math either. What do you have for your two numbers, Christy?
I have 3.75 and 2.07. Yeah. And 3.75.
okay.
Okay. And then I did a brief primer, well, not so brief, on what each of those types of funds means.
Should the enterprise funds be up above the ABRSD, E&D? Because those more on the municipal side where the ABRSD stuff is on the school side.
No, that's a separate stabilization. Oh, yeah, the enterprise funds.
See what I mean? Just, I don't know if that's the way it should be or not.
I did it this way because when we say reserves and talk about reserves in every other area and in every other time, we are discussing these dollars up here. And yes, we want to have a more well-rounded picture of the total reserve funds the town has put aside. But when we say reserves, we're always talking about these two numbers.
I have a correction to the ABRSD E&D. The numbers that I had from Dave Bertolino for our last meeting, using the 85% rule puts us at 2890.
Okay, thanks. I just got this off the most recent ALG spreadsheet.
So they upped it. They upped their, or is that the? Let me check something. That's not the number from Dave Bertolino 2 weeks ago. So unless ALG changed, unless he's got a different number at ALG.
Okay, I'll try to get some clarity on that. The ALG plan right now has it at 3.1. So I will try to figure out which one of those is the right number to have.
I think having all this information here is confusing.
Okay, where would you like it, or where would you not like it?
I'm still stuck on the idea that I don't think we should be considering the schools.
I don't know that we're considering them. This is the state of the town section of our, here's what Acton looks like.
I think this is a lot of information that you have to get into a fairly nuanced discussion to understand.
Okay, I was trying to address as best I could the committee's desire to take a broader look at reserves. I'm happy to put this as an appendix, or to edit away whatever is noise.
I was hoping to get the committee to argue with me.
They must all agree.
No, I've said my piece. I think all these numbers are valid and worthwhile, but you've said it a couple of times that you think it's outside of the scope. I think this is legitimate information. This is all money that's been taken by taxation. I would put an asterisk next to sewerage because that is definitely user fees, whereas the rest is on the backs of every taxpayer in town.
Well, I mean, I don't use the transfer station.
But you paid for it. You paid for the subsidy to it.
I thought it was a really tiny subsidy. I thought the transfer station was self-funding.
Transfer station? Transfer station's user fees. You pay your dump pass, and now you're paying pay as you throw for the bags. That's what's running that part of.
But does it get a general fund subsidy?
I thought ambulance was the only one that got any kind of general fund.
Oh,
Ambulance
transportation.
and transportation.
So those two maybe should have an asterisk, but
Is Steve Moonstone or maybe Steve Gardner comment on that?
The ambulance and transportation are the only two funds currently receiving a subsidy.
Does that change your opinion, Jason?
I agree with Christy that we'd have to put an asterisk next to okay or. Okay.
I'll do my best to write in what that asterisk means in a way that doesn't hopefully further confuse and complicate this slide and explanation.
How about if you just had a total number for enterprise funds, and then if they want to know the detail, you would have that in your back pocket. Or else, you're going to go down a rabbit hole talking about these different funds, and your meeting is going to last 2 hours instead of 20 minutes. Just my opinion.
So
You know, the point of view shouldn't be about the individual totals in each one of these enterprise funds, just consolidated as one number. And then have the detail available if someone asks.
I'm going to be, I think I agree with Christy. I don't think we need to have the slide, especially the E&D portion of it. It should not be here. So I would disagree with Jason and Christine. So that's my view. Do we have to take a vote on this, or how do we proceed?
I'd rather not leave this hanging. I don't care what we do with this slide. I just want to know what to do with the slide, or trash it.
We
Does
need to
it-
slide about reserves.
Right? Does it accomplish the goal, regardless of our reserve policy? Does it accomplish the previous stated goal of having an overall understanding of all of the reserve dollars held by the town, or does it simply complicate that discussion?
I believe it should all be there. If you want to have a single line for enterprise funds to make it easier to read, I'm okay with it, but I believe that all 5 of these bullets are legit.
I'm on entirely the opposite side.
You think it does not belong to C at all?
I think this would be fine having that information in a backup slide. I think this really overly complicates the idea of this is the money available for running the town.
Well, how about we classify them as, in top tier, we say, reserves under the control of the Acton Town Meeting, which are free cash and stabilization, reserves under the control of the school district, school committee, which are ABRSD, and ABRSD stabilization funds, and other, not even reserves, retained earnings,
I like that a lot.
not easily accessible, or, however you want to phrase it.
Right.
Should the reserves funds then be, reserve funds, the enterprise funds just be in their own separate slide?
Stop adding slides, Roland.
I know, but it's,
No, it's fine here.
What if we rolled it up to be one number?
That's what I just
That's
said.
fine.
I said it's fine to roll it up as one number, but when I said the 5 bullets, I meant the 5 major bullets. I didn't say I said you can roll all the enterprise funds up into one number.
All right. Why don't I take a stab at the 3 classifications that Steve Noon suggested and rework this slide a little bit, and see if it becomes useful to us and to everybody.
If there was a reason to go back to the 5 bullets, I think you could put an asterisk next to the 3 that are purely user funded, that don't receive general funds support, to highlight that difference, rather than you had it the other way around, the 2 that do.
Okay. All right. When we come back to this, we'll definitely come back to this slide. Probably not for the rest of them. This is this has changed because this number has changed. But otherwise, I think that this information is the same. This is what you're asking for, Mr. Noon.
Yes. It's not the first time it's been on a slide.
But I guess maybe this is the first time I'm understanding that that at the end of the day it falls to us, and it's not just a wish list item, but it's actually something that we need to put on our to-do list to work with the other entities and make sure that we accomplish this.
Well, good, then I accomplished my goal for
Yeah.
tonight.
Well done. Okay. This is unchanged. So the recommendations for it are unchanged. Opeb, Steve updated the numbers on Opeb, and that was really interesting because the schools dropped like 25 years off of their payment plan.
We just had a meeting of the school's OPEB trust, and we were briefed by the investment advisor and the actuary. The OPEB liabilities are driven by assumptions on top of assumptions on top of assumptions. The biggest significant one I saw was a change in what they considered the long-term medical inflation rate cranked out over 30 years. It made a big difference. On the town side, town has different actuaries and different investment advisors. So last year they had a bigger drop. This year it was the school. So again, it's all based on assumptions, but it was good news.
Yeah, so before now, we kind of had a, hey, if you don't increase to 1.6 million a year, you're never going to fund this thing. This kind of changes that.
Changes it for this year.
For this year, right. So I sort of crossed all that language out and just said that they should continue to prioritize funding their OPEB liability.
Yeah, don't get rid of it. We may need it again next year.
Right. I'm not going to lose it, but I think it would be strange of us to continue to push them to go up to 1.6 million.
Yeah.
Now that the math has changed. For now.
Right.
Okay.
So do we want to say continue funding at current level for now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. There, we did.
The wastewater treatment plant repairs and upgrades, would that be out of the enterprise fund? The sewage?
Yeah, I would think.
So I added an asterisk because I think if I understand properly, the payment of the debt for this project would be covered by user fees and come out of the sewage enterprise fund. Don't need this anymore. And so far they haven't managed to pass that anyway.
And you might as well put a comma there and say, but the town is responsible for the total bond.
So the town bonds it and then it's paid for out of the fund?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, they don't have any ability to bond on their own, so they're general obligation bonds of the town. But the debt service is paid by the sewer users.
Yep.
That's not changed. The reserve slide is the same, except that we still need minimum and maximum.
I think we agreed on 3% for the min, didn't we? I mean, at least that's solved tonight.
There we go.
Do we agree?
Yes.
Am I overstepping my bounds here?
Nick? I think I agree with your agreeing. Okay, so we have more work to do on the reserve policy. This is what we are continuing to discuss. This we will tighten up.
Hold on. Our discussion that kind of got us heading into a lot of this was the idea of actually using reserves this year.
Yep.
And I've been wondering how much we should be encouraging the use of E&D, because presumably this school is taking on a lot of one-time expenses. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think it, yeah.
I think we have to have a serious discussion about whether we agree with that first bullet point.
I still think we want them to minimize their use, even if they have to use some. Right? If the minimum use is 2 million, don't use 2.1 million.
Well, but if the schools, it's easier to look at the situation right now from where I'm standing and imagine that it's easier for the town to contain its spending increases compared to the schools who still have so many, don't know what's going on and are in such a bind with are things open or not constantly. So I'm inclined personally to say that the schools should use a good portion of their E&D this year to offset some of the, and this is just me spitballing, but offset some of the, what I imagine are going to be significant budgetary increases.
That may depend on how long they stay open. It's so variable. It's really, I have trouble considering limits.
Then I would say strategic use of E&D.
I'm good with that.
I can't see people, so if you have any opinion, please chime in.
We put them all to sleep.
You could be more blunt and just say, use as little as possible.
Well, I don't know if that's what we should be saying.
Well, the problem is, it's not over this year.
No, but I think the school's in their rainy day. And I think the town is getting ready for it.
Well, and we're also suggesting that, or at least I believe a couple of us are suggesting that this is the year that we need tax relief, and therefore using reserves to allow for tax relief is a good thing. So I have a problem with the whole concept of this reserve line.
That's strategic use.
I think the reserves are too high. And since it's a rainy day, let's match up the fact that it's a rainy day with the use of reserves to mitigate the rainy day.
All right, I would ask that we have this discussion after we have numbers.
Table this to next month. I think it's the 8th.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think this has changed. I think that's it. I think those are the changes. So we've got 3 or 4 slides to look back on next time, and then this thing will be done.
Thank you again for doing it. And I know you're ready to be done with it. 3 or 4 more slides could be a good number of hours.
You guys are killing me.
I'm sorry. Tax bills have increased over $600 on average per year for the past 3 years.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe that needs to be 600 per year
I think it.
on average. 600 per year on average for the last 3 years.
Okay. Done. Easy one. I'm gonna give you back your screens.
All right. Is that good for everyone on the point of view? Let's see if we're going to. Okay. Let's move on to committee business. We have I believe it was August 11th, unfortunately my computer went away, minutes to review. Has people had a chance to read it, and do you have any edits?
I haven't edited.
Please share.
So, I don't know who wrote this, but it says on item number 2, Director Barrett updated the committee. However, due to the uncertainty of revenues in late winter and early spring, the town manager instituted spending higher increase, which resulted in a significant municipal operating budget of nearly $1.4 million. So it sounds like that we have an operating budget of only $1.4 million to run the town.
That's the turnbacks. I'm sorry, that's the excess.
I believe that should say municipal operating budget,
Turn back or excess?
upside.
Yeah, there's Steve Barrett, what's the word for this?
Yeah, that's the turn back. That's my bad. That should have said municipal turn back of 1.4.
Hey, I thought we really dropped the budget and went to 1.4 million. It's getting pretty nasty about that. I mean, I'd have a very low tax bill next year.
Right? That's what we're talking about.
That's it. And I'm watching the house next door to me that went on the market last week or 2 weeks ago now, and how many people have been through it in the last two open houses, the last 2 weekends, and it's been substantial on the house that needs work.
I'm curious to see how long this sticks around, where companies start demanding people come back in once they're
Well,
stabilized.
we were supposed to go in, I was supposed to go in a week from this Friday to clean out my desk, to remodel the building to give us more space. And they stopped that because of the rise in COVID.
Yeah, my husband's company just said that they're not going to be in before July 5th.
And I would not be surprised if that's the case across the board.
Yeah, my company closed the office out here entirely and said everyone has to work from home indefinitely, permanently.
But I could see in 2 years that they might be saying, okay, we're not getting
The productivity out of its
Thank you.
workers? It's possible.
No, it's not productive, but you lose a lot not having people in the office.
Move to approve the minutes of August 11th, 2020.
Second.
Hold on. I just wanted to make a comment. Just curious to we still have Al's names in the minutes. Is that
Yeah, this
right?
is-
I
this
know
is
I
for
sent
August
the email
11th.
to Ryan. So he was still the associate then?
He was still here then.
As amended.
These are for August 11th. He didn't quit until after that. Did you? I think I heard a second.
I seconded it.
it.
All right,
But
I'll do roll call vote. Adam,
Abstain.
Steve,
Aye.
Roland,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Christine,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Sahana,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
and Christy. I say aye. All right. The minutes have passed. And committee reports. Who wants to start? Jason.
School building committee, couple of points. We should have our guaranteed maximum price no later than December 16th. It might even come in a week prior to that. All quotes are going through consensus mediation at this time. But we should have, we might have it as early as December 2nd, but as late as December 16th. We are currently over our contingency by $1.7 million, but that is if you count out all of the possible change requests that are in the tracking sheet. About a third of all of the change requests have been committed to. So there is the possibility that they find inventive ways of solving some of the issues that we see now, and so there is hopefully an upside potential to close that current $1.7 million contingency problem that we currently have. Main problems continue to be ledge, and there is a significant back and forth that has to occur with the utility companies as there's been a change to where the feed is going to come in, which apparently has a $600,000 or $700,000 impact on the project. There's also another $400,000 or so with regard to battery conduit placement. Again, we're hoping that we can find some inventive ways of solving that $1 million problem. And the other big business that was covered in the last meeting is that they selected a design for the walkway, the covered walkway between the two sites over the marsh area. Oh, and there is a beaver dam. There is a beaver dam that needs to be torn down, and the beavers have to be captured because the water table there is higher than it's ever been noticed before. and is actually starting to encroach on a couple of houses. From the school's perspective, this is a problem because the beaver dam is actually on town property, not school property.
Good luck with that.
Joy. Yeah.
It could be angry.
So what do they do? They relocate the beaver somewhere else?
Yeah, they're protected species.
I didn't get the full details, but I did hear something about a beaver trap permit having been issued. So hopefully we can relocate it to someplace else.
$200, Carl.
Roll in, behave.
Just be a gift.
Anyone else? Sana?
Oh, I'll let Steve go first.
Just to preview, the health insurance trust will meet on December 3rd, and it is our plan to set rates for next budget year at that time.
Sana?
We all received the wonderful updates that Selectman Benson sends us after each select board meeting. The only thing of importance from the last selectmen's meeting was that they approved the dog park at the Main Street site. So in case you all did not know, there's going to be a dog park there.
Can you give some more details on that? I know there was controversy on having to work with the neighbors.
Okay. It's actually 348 Main Street, which is closest to the Route 2. And the site is owned by the town, so we do not need a formal town meeting approval since the board already decided to approve this. And the dog park committee will be looking to CPC to cover about 10% of the construction cost of the dog park. They're looking for funding from outside foundation for the rest of it. But the CPA funding would need to be approved at the next annual town meeting.
And how does this change the buildability or sellability of the lot, what else they were planning on doing there?
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's going to be a dog park.
Well, no, they're not turning the whole lot into a dog park, or they're going to have a huge issue with it being a $1.8 million dog park.
No,
It's
you know, the big part is going to be senior housing,
Yeah.
as you recall, and the only part remaining was the parcel to the left of Isaac Davis Way. Unless that was used as a one big consolidated site, it's not really economically. It's hard to do anything creative or revenue generating with that small piece of land situated where it is. So I think the dog park is a good use. It has no impact on the adjacent site. As a matter of fact, where the dog park is, that will be where probably the sewage tanks will be for the housing project.
And there's no problem with that?
No.
But there was a lot of objection from the neighbors adjacent to the site. But I think the selectmen voted 4-1, if I'm not mistaken, on that particular.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else have any reports?
Dr. McQuillan did my report for me
He did a good
earlier.
job.
Planning board. So they met last week. They're getting quite a lot of opposition to the development that's been ongoing for 22 Elm Street, mostly coming from Green Acton. There's currently a shade tree conflict happening on Pearl Street, which I wanted to mention to all of you. I highly recommend that you folks go over to Pearl Street and have a look at how the developer put a sidewalk in front of one of the new homes that went in over there regarding a tree that now they want to take down. Literally, they paved the sidewalk right through the tree. So the tree is now sticking right out in the center of the sidewalk. Definitely worth a look. I highly recommend it. And then the next workshop for the drive-up window discussion for town has been moved to December 8th. And the latest correspondence I got on that didn't have a set time yet, that it's going to be announced later.
I think that's
That's
when our
all.
next meeting is, probably during our next meeting. Anyone else? All right, now Isha's not here. So I think that leaves it to Adam to make a motion for us.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All right. We'll go through our vote. Adam,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Roland,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Christine.
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Sahana,
Aye.
Dave.
Dave, is this Dave?
Yeah.
Aye.
Christy, I'd say aye. Thank you. I will see you all, I believe, on December 8th.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yep. Stay safe, everyone.
Happy holidays.